This week on HomeKit News, the Arylic LP10 audio streamer with AirPlay 2 and Google Cast. Welcome back everybody. Today we're not looking at this product, the Arylic S10 Plus, which whilst very good only uses AirPlay 1. Instead we're looking at a new and improved model, namely the Arylic LP10. How is this better? Well, for a start, it now uses AirPlay 2 for multi-room streaming. It also has Google Cast as well as directly connecting to other services like Spotify and Tidal. For our viewers, there's an exclusive limited time 10% discount available using the code HNR10 with a link in the description. So how does AirPlay work? If you're not familiar with Apple's own streaming protocol, allow me to explain. So if you play music from a computer, an iPhone or an iPad for example, you can send that audio from these devices to the LP10. In turn, the LP10 can be wired to things like power amps, soundbars or powered speakers, allowing audio from previously mentioned devices to be played back through these audio units. Okay, so what's included in the box on this occasion? You get the LP10 itself, of course, along with a user manual in English. There's a standard USB power adapter, and you also get a remote control, although this is probably not the model you'll get. More on that in a bit. There's a USB-A to USB-C cable for powering the LP10, a stereo jack-to-jack audio cable, and a stereo jack to phono cable, both of which help connecting the LP10 to your audio equipment. There is no optical audio cable included, however. Let's take a closer look now, comparing the LP10 and the S10 Plus. So both look almost identical from the outside, with touch controls available on both models. The fronts of both look the same, although the LP10 now has a dynamic OLED display, which the S10 doesn't. The unit is pretty small at only 4¼ inches wide and 2.8 inches deep. It's also just over 1 inch tall as well, so pretty dinky. Moving to the back of the LP10 now, and you have an RJ45 port for wiring the LP directly to your Wi-Fi network, although it also offers both 2.4 and 5 GHz Wi-Fi connectivity. There's a USB port for connecting a memory stick for audio file playback. There's a line-in and line-out port for connecting to audio devices, as well as an optical out for digital audio. And finally, there's a USB-C port which can power the device but also stream audio from a connected computer whilst also powering the LP10. I mentioned a remote control earlier, and although this is the remote you're likely to get in the box, I got the older version as the LP10 is a review unit. The remote you'll get should generally offer the same features as listed here, and as there are many, feel free to pause the video if required. The remote uses 2 AAA batteries which are not included. Let's now look at a more full comparison between the LP10 and the S10 Plus. So as mentioned, the LP10 now offers AirPlay 2, but it also offers Bluetooth 5.2, a significant upgrade that amongst other things supports LE audio and multi-audio streaming. The LP now offers 5 GHz Wi-Fi as well as Google Cast for non-AirPlay users, and the OLED display is also an upgrade from static icons on the S10 Plus, but all this increases the price, although not very drastically. Onto the physical setup now, and I'm connecting the LP10 to a soundbar in our living room. I've got it hooked up to my router for a wired connection, and I'm using the optical out, and it's powered via the USB-C port. Let's see the unit in action now, starting with the power button. As you can see, when I press this, the OLED display uses pixels and graphics to show you more detailed information. I'm going to use the remote to change some settings, but you can see that currently it's showing a wired connection with a volume set at 47. Via the remote, I can switch to Bluetooth easily enough, which is useful if you want to stream other types of audio. I can also switch to the USB input if I wish, or line in, which allows me to connect external audio devices. Tapping on the Wi-Fi button just brings me back to my wired connection in this case. I can increase or decrease the volume via the remote quite easily, which adjusts adjusts the volume in units of 3 for some reason. I can also adjust the amount of bass, which just has 3 levels plus or minus. The same applies for adjusting the amount of treble. Finally, I can even adjust the level of brightness for the display itself, which couldn't be done on the S10 Plus. So I'll just long press on this button to turn the unit off again. Now, the LP10 isn't a HomeKit device as such, but as it uses AirPlay 2, you can still add it as though it is a HomeKit device in some ways. If I tap on Add Accessory and skip the Scan Code option and select More Options, it eventually shows up as a nearby device. Once selected, it only takes a few moments to add it, select Room and rename it as required. If I now scroll down a bit, you can see the LP10 is now listed with its own tile. In the settings section, I can include it in scenes and automations, although they are slightly limited in scope, but this is something not possible with the S10 Plus due to it only offering AirPlay 1. Let's now test it with Apple Music, and in this case, to avoid copyright claims, I'm using music I created myself over the years. I've got this track here released last year, and if I select the AirPlay icon, you can see the LP10 is listed below. I'll select it and begin playing the audio back, so it'll come through the LP10 from there to the soundbar. As the included remote uses infrared, there are possibilities to control the LP10 by other means. Aqara, for example, make a few devices that also include an IR blaster, like the Hub M3, Camera Hub G3 and the Hub M2. SwitchBot make the Hub Mini with Matter, the Hub 2 and the recently released Hub 3. Additionally, there are Matter-enabled IR blasters that can expose IR devices set up in their own apps to Apple HomeKit, although only adding simple on-off controls. In this case, I'm going to add control via an older Aqara M2 hub. The presets offered here don't really match the LP10, so I'll select Customize, which then brings up presets for different types of remotes. Although once again, none quite match what I need, so I'll forego these presets and just create a series of buttons. I made a remote previously, so I'll just skip back a few pages and show you the buttons I've added for basic control. Now, it doesn't look good, but for the purposes of using these controls in automations, it's not something you're going to be looking at. Let's now test out the buttons, and if I select mute, you can see the LP10 is now muted. Similarly, if I tap volume up or volume down, the LP10 responds accordingly. Play and pause don't work in this case as there's no music streaming. Finally, the power button turns the unit off as expected. When it comes to Aqara, all of these controls can be used in scenes and automations within the Aqara app and can also be exposed to Apple Home. If you own the Aqara Panel Hub S1 Plus, you can also create scenes and control the LP10 from the screen. Here I've got a couple of scenes to mute the LP10 or turn it on and off. I'll briefly touch on Google Cast now, which is similar to AirPlay but for Android users. I'm in Apple Music on an Android device now, and if I select a track from this album, one of my own, it plays on the device as normal. If I tap on the Google Cast icon, it brings up all compatible speakers as well as created speaker groups. You can see my Nest Hub Max is part of the test group, and to show it streaming to all speakers in that group, let's go from the Nest Hub over to the kitchen where I'm playing the same track through the Nest Mini. Pretty good. Finally, to the pros and cons, starting with AirPlay 2, which really makes it much more useful than the S10 Plus, which only had AirPlay 1. Now, even though the design hasn't changed, it still looks very slick, but also understated in my opinion. Most AirPlay devices will offer a digital or analog output, but the options to connect a USB stick or even computer via the USB-C port take this a step further than most other AirPlay devices. It's great to have a wired connection, but now with the option to use 5 GHz Wi-Fi 2, this gives you more choice than the S10 Plus once again. The OLED display is admittedly small, but because it's dynamic, you get to see more information than just static icons. Finally, with Google Cast, if you have compatible speakers and family members with Android devices, they can now enjoy multi-room streaming akin to AirPlay. So this is another excellent addition. So this is a very worthy successor to the S10 Plus, which was already great despite it lacking AirPlay 2. So there really are no cons to mention on this occasion. So that's our take on the Arylic LP10. Is something like AirPlay and more specifically multi-room audio something you've been looking into? And if you're a multi-platform household, is this something you've been waiting for, given that it's got Google Cast? Let me know in the comments section below, and if you've got any questions on this or any of my other videos, ask away and I'll always reply. In the meantime, if you enjoyed this video, show some love by giving it a like, share if you can, and do subscribe if you haven't done so already. It just remains for me to leave you with this week's words of wisdom from Jack Handy. So see you next time.